Hi, I'm Anita Potter from Anita Potter Productions, and today I'm going to show you a mix breakdown of Malamor Dead to the World. Yes, it was a mix competition that ended on January 13th. Winners will be notified somewhere on February 17th that week. So I thought I'd just go ahead. After the competition ended, I decided I should just do a mix breakdown. So this is what I'm going to do right now. You can see my session right here. I did a lot of editing to the drums. I had a horrible time trying to get these drums to sound right. And if you wanted to listen to my entry, I'll fly a link out on the top right and leave a link in the description below, as well as a link to the official mix of this track. So let's get started. So we got the drums. I'll go over the mix bus last, but we got our drums right here. You see I did some gain staging on the kick mic 1 and the kick D4. There were 3 kicks in this particular set. I deleted the other one because it was out of time. And I didn't watch any of the mix breakdowns beforehand or track breakdowns or at all because I didn't want to be influenced by them, because I've been doing this long enough to know how I should get everything to sound good. So what I did was, on here, this drum set was extremely ringy. The ring was in everything. So I just deleted out the empty spaces, and as you can see in all the tracks and the snare, I had the worst time with this. And it's still the one thing that people had issues with my mix was a snare. And they're right, the snare is not as good as I had hoped it would have been. I tried everything to get that snare to sound decent. So let's see, we got the kick. Let's start with the kick mic 1. Look at the FX. I used the Q range. That was it. Little extreme. High passed at 38. Boosted 54. And let's see, what's 4? Dipped down 101 for the bass. And then low passed at 374 hertz. That way it's just the kick and nothing else. I think I might have done the same thing to this kick too. Nope, all I did was high pass it at 44.9 and low passed it at 11.66 kilohertz. And I deleted the other one. The overheads, I turned into a stereo track and panned them left and right at 90%. And all I did with this was high passed it at 137 and then put a high shelf, ducked it down 3.7 dB at 1.63 kilohertz. Now the snare track. Oh my God, this stinking snare track. I had a horrible time with this snare. It did not sound good. So, I did do a pitch. Okay, so EQ'd, bumped it up at 249 hertz, and then did a high shelf and gained it up 2.6 dB. Oops, I did not mean to close that. Let's open that back up again. And then I added the Nembrini Lo-Fi with the preset snare snap to get it to be a little more snappy. I did it again. I wasn't done. And then I pitched it -4 semitones using repitch and reaper, just to get it to not sound so high. I guess that's the word for it. As you can see on here, I cut anything out that was not a snare hit to get rid of the bleed, the ringing bleed that was in the track. And then here's this other snare. Let's see. On this one, I did a Q range. I think this was the original snare, and that snare was a snare sample that I painstakingly got in there. It was a dynamic split. and split everything up, and then deleted all the bits that weren't a snare, and then tried a bazillion different snare samples. I even went as far as using a kick sample and pitched it to try to get some body into that snare, and it just wasn't working. So I abandoned that idea and just decided, okay, let me just deal with this regular snare, which is this. High passed it at 177 and a high shelf at 4.8 dB, which is extreme, at 3.38 kilohertz. And I also used a gate, which gates and me don't get along, and I used regate. All the other gates I have weren't working properly, or at least I couldn't figure out how to get them to work properly. It just sounded awful on there. So I set the pre-open is at 2 milliseconds, attack is at 1. I held it for 40 milliseconds, and then somebody told me, oh, you should let it go longer. But seeing as I don't work with gates all that often, I didn't know, because I was trying to keep the ring out because it was very distracting. And I released it at 100 milliseconds, and I have no what hysteresis is. Just left it at -3. Did all the left everything pretty well, much basically how it is, and just like all the way up on wet, and then turned the dry and the noise were completely off. All right, and then the hats, pan them 60% to the right. And which is hard for me because I am left-handed. I have a drum set. I play left-handed. So I had to listen to the overheads to figure out which side the hi-hats sounded louder at, and then panned them accordingly. And I just high-passed it at 414 hertz. Let's see. The room mic, I took the 2 tracks, turned them into a stereo track, and cut out all the nonsense in there too. And the only thing on here is Q range, which I used a high pass at 52. Okay, that was an odd choice. This is a shelf. Is that a shelf? Yeah, this is a shelf. Shelved it, dipped it down 3.4 dB at 1.15, and then low passed at 5.7 hertz. It's not something I would normally do. All right, the tom tracks. Yes, there are tom tracks here, and I have to like zoom in. Let me see if I can find anything that wasn't a tom hit got deleted. Like there, and this, and then turn the volume up on them all because you couldn't really hear them make an impact. The first one I high passed at 74.7 and then low passed at 5.7. Tom 2, basically the same thing. Yep, so 74.7 and then 5.7. And then the third tom track, I think it was all the same. So I treated all the toms the same. And let's see, pan tom 1, 32% to the right, tom 2, 32% to the left, and then the third tom 60% to the left. I set the snares to a reverb. I used ROM from Native Instruments. Medium drum room. I think I fiddled with some of the stuff. 37% mix. The low cut at -5.64. The high cut at 9.12. Reverb is all the way up. Modulation is off. Dampening is at 48.5%. Decay is 1.2 seconds. Diffusion 40.5. And the size 57.5. And that drum crush. I tried using the Waves H compressor, but I didn't like it, so I went to Melda's compressor. Did it knee mode as hard. Threshold at -23.2. Ratio, it only goes up to 20:1. Dang it. I really enjoy the 50:1, but that's how this is. And I release 0. Link channel maximized to 0 dB. which is what I did. Okay. And then an overall drum reverb, I EQ'd, I high passed at 70 and low passed at 5.7. And used the old school verb with the preset warm hall with these settings here. And I muted the dry because I wanted 100% wet. Okay. Now if that's done, we go to the bass. I did some volume automation on that. Did I do volume automation on any of the drums? Oh, I did. I should have went over that. I turned down the kicks in certain sections, especially when it was like these, where it's like a lot of kick hits. I turned them down -3. And then they go back up when they were normal, and then -3 all throughout. Except I think at the end. Oh no, I did it at the end. No, at the end I left it at 0, or actually in here at 0. I don't think that was the end. That's not the end. Yeah, and I left it alone. And I did that on both the kick tracks. Don't believe I didn't do any volume automation on anything else. So we got our bass here. In the certain section where the bass was by itself, I volume automated it up plus 2 dB. So we got our bass DI, which is extreme here. For basically just the low end is what I used it for. High passed at 59.5, boosted it at 110, like when we ducked 110 or whatever out of the kick. So the bass would have some space. And then low passed at 465 with a 48 dB slope. And then the amp I used for the high end. So I wiped off the low end at 135 hertz and then boosted it up at 1.5 with a 3.2 dB gain. And that was all for the bass. The guitar track, I didn't bother with doing EQs on the separate tracks. And the guitar 1, I panned at 52 left, guitar 2, 52 right, because there wasn't really any standout lead parts. It was more like a rhythm chugging type of thing. So I didn't feel the need to like pan them wide completely like in choruses or whatever. So the effects on here, just Q range, high passed it at 100 hertz, dipped it down at 613 because it was a little mid-rangey for me at -6.1 dB, and then low passed at 5.48 with a 48 dB slope. And that was it for the guitars. The vocals, so much fun. Gained up the main vocal at plus 3.86 dB, and I don't believe I didn't do any volume automation on those at all. So let's check out the lead here. It's just a Q range, high passed at 110, and then gave him a high shelf at 1.73 hertz with a 4.7 dB gain. And then the second backish lead, I'm not sure how you classify those at, but I high passed his since he was so, that one was really high up. It didn't really have a lot of low anything in the vocals, so I high passed at 251 and gained him up a little higher, 9.8 dB at 841 hertz. Yes, it's extreme, and I gained it up initially at 1.58 dB. I cut out some nonsense that was in the tracks, and that was it on that. Now we go to the vocal reverb. Ignore these are my test mixes. Okay, so the vocal reverb I EQ'd with a high pass and a low pass, 159 hertz, and then again at 3.96 kilohertz. And I used the Rev plate by Arturia with not sure what that's set to. Is that, can't tell if those are seconds or milliseconds, but it was like it's right at the 2 line, just a little above it. 100% wet, 100% width, drives all the way down, and I used Model 2 on that. So now that we've done that, let's go and check out the mix bus. And these are my go-to things that I use. Here, let me get these snapped down. Move it over so you can see it better. Okay, now the Nova 67P is the first in my chain. For my mix bus, I side chained out 119 hertz for the low end, so the compressor isn't pumping. I set the attack and release to the lowest they would go. I did the ratio at 2:1. And when I normally do not do this, I turn the master up 2 dB. And I gave it a bit of a high shelf, but I'm not sure exactly where. Because there's no like thing you could see it on. And I did the compressor bit as like at minus 0.8. So on the, oh, that's his Nova 67P. Limiter number 6, I left the compressor off, seeing as the 67P is handling that. I had a peak limiter at minus 0.3 dB. Left everything pretty well much as it came standard. Turned off the high filter limiter, the clipper, and protection. Now, when I rendered it out, it did show some clipping on the render, but there was no digital clipping. It didn't sound distorted, so I wasn't bothered with it. And it did it like 20 to 30 some odd times in it. So there was no distortion, nothing. So I'm not going to worry about it. Yeah, that's basically all this track was. That's all I did to it. Even though it took, I probably would have gotten done with it a lot quicker than I did. I finished it the Monday before the entries were closed. And it was only because the drums were driving me crazy. I could not get that snare how I wanted. I wanted the snare to have more body to it. And I just, no matter what I did, I could not get it to work how I wanted to hear it. But it's good practice. I've never mixed a death metal track before. This is the first one. I don't think all the other ones that I did weren't like this. A lot of like drum and stuff. And this was originally released, I believe, if I remember correctly, back in 1996, I think. But you can listen to the official mix, and then you can listen to my mix. I'll leave links in the description below. Did you do this song? Did you enter this competition? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye for now.